So the idea of these virtual coffee chats came about partly because of meeting Nick virtually. I've never actually spoken to her in real time. Hello. But I'm really glad she's here. And I sorry, I'm just quitting my mail so it doesn't make weird noises. So I wrote this book, as you all know by now, The Mortality Shot. Yay. It's a hybrid collection of essays and stories and a stage text. And I discovered simultaneously that I was autistic. And some of this stuff is written, most of it was written before knowing that, though some while I was beginning to understand that. And so the process of putting it together was really interesting in that regard, because I had written this stuff before, but I realized looking at it like, oh, this is pretty autistic, as I began to understand what that actually meant. And I, like many people, had very strange ideas of what that meant. And one of the people and one of the books that really helped me was Nick's book, NEUROQUEER HERESIES, and her website. Yay! And please note the strange and interesting correlation of blue butterflies. Okay, so this is, I painted this, by the way, in March 2021. I finished the painting right after my diagnosis, so that's interesting. So this is all very cool. And so her idea, and she and a couple other people, and I'm going to let her speak for herself soon, came up with this whole idea of the neurodiversity paradigm as opposed to the pathology paradigm, and really took it on its head what the idea of being autistic is, and different kinds of neurodiversity as well. But I'm going to focus on the autism bit right now for my own sake. And reading this and reading her writing just shifted and helped shift along with also reading a book that I know that she also likes, Authoring Autism, also incredibly important book. And these two books really shifted my idea of what it meant and what it could mean. And that, in fact, it's a difference of neurotype, not a pathology to be fixed. And that just shifted a whole point of view for me as a person. So when I was looking for people to blurb my book, I didn't think of Nick originally, because I thought, well, but it's not exactly about autism and da, da, da. But a friend of mine's like, no, just check it out. Just try to get in touch with her. I was like, okay. And thanks to the miracle of Twitter pre-Elon Musk, I was able to do that. And shockingly to me, she responded and then read my book very quickly and very, in my opinion, autistic fashion. like, oh, you want me to read the book? Okay, I'll read it in a day. And then sent me this beautiful blurb. And I was so moved. And then I thought, well, maybe my book does have something to do with all of this. So that's great. And so anyway, that's that. And then the intro I'm going to give now formally is from her book, and then I'm going to let her speak for herself finally. And I love this intro, so I'm sorry, I have to read it. Nick Walker is a queer, transgender, flamingly autistic writer. I love that. That's my new goal. An educator best known for her foundational work on the neurodiversity paradigm, her development of the term neuroqueer and the concept of neuroqueering, and her contribution to fostering the emergent genre of neuroqueer speculative fiction. She's a professor of psychology at California Institute of Integral Studies, which is a great place, and senior instructor at the Ike Arts Center in Berkeley. Dr. Walker is co-founder and managing editor of the worker-owned indie publishing house Autonomous Press, yay, and has co-edited and contributed to multiple volumes of the annual Spoon Knife Neuroqueer Lit Anthology, published by Autonomous Press's Neuroqueer Books imprint. So we're going to also be talking about literature and autism. And along with her co-writer Andrew M. Reichart, I hope I'm saying that right, and artist Mike Benowitz, Dr. Walker is part of the creative team behind the urban fantasy webcomic Weird Luck. Okay, so with all of that intro, Nick, would you like to say whatever you want to say about yourself, about anything? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to finally get to converse with you. I don't really have anything to say to introduce myself beyond what you've already said. I think I'm just ready to launch into whatever conversation we should have.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. I'm glad I successfully introduced you. That was my biggest my biggest concern.
I feel well introduced.
Okay, you feel like I'm glad. Well, what I wanted to ask you about, because I know there are people here, a mix of people that probably know your work well and some that probably don't. And so I'm wondering if you would be willing, because I know you didn't want to read from your book, but to give a thumbnail, because what was really helpful to me was actually, and this might seem super basic to you at this stage, but your definition of what autism itself is, and the neurodiversity paradigm. And I don't know if you want to just give a little bit of an introduction to that, if that would be okay.
Oh, well, I don't want to talk about what autism is because I'm sort of done with that topic after 2 decades of it. But I will talk about the neurodiversity paradigm briefly. Yeah, sure. So essentially, what the term neurodiversity is the diversity of human minds, just all the different ways that people's minds work. And so every single human being ever is part of the spectrum of neurodiversity because we all have some sort of central nervous system, right? It's just like you can't not be a part of the spectrum of ethnic diversity or cultural diversity or diversity of body sizes. Everybody is somewhere on there. Same with neurodiversity. So neurodiversity doesn't refer to specific variants like autism. It refers to the entire spectrum of different ways that human minds can work. And the term emerged from the autism rights movement back in the 1990s, and autistic sociologist Judy Singer first put it into the academic discourse in 1998. Later on, starting in the early years of the 21st century, in conversations and like autistic message boards and early social media forums and such, and then eventually in a piece published in 2012, which is reprinted in my book, I introduced this idea of what I saw as an emerging neurodiversity paradigm and a cultural paradigm shift that I saw the potential for. And so what I argued was that the current dominant way of thinking about human neurodiversity was what I call a pathology paradigm. And the pathology paradigm starts from the assumption that there's such a thing as a normal mind and a normal way for human minds to work, and that normal is conflated with right and healthy. And then anything that diverges too much from that the dominant cultural standards of normativity is considered to be a pathology or defect of some kind that's in need of correction. And so what I saw emerging in the autistic rights movement, and what I proposed we explicitly work towards, is a shift towards a cultural neurodiversity paradigm. And the neurodiversity paradigm would recognize that the idea of a normal mind was a culturally constructed fiction, and that it was harmful in the same way as the idea of a master race or a normal sexuality or a right way to do gender. And that when you see things through that lens, you realize, neurodiversity is subject to the same sort of social dynamics as any other form of diversity. There are social power inequalities, certain dynamics of privilege and oppression, where certain groups are privileged and certain groups aren't. And so the idea of something like autism being regarded as a disorder or a pathology is just like, when I was a kid and being gay was considered a mental disorder, and there were attempts to, there's a whole industry around curing that, and this massive stigma around it, and in the early, in the 1800s, and really for most of the 20th century, the idea that being gay could be regarded as something other than a disorder, other than a problem, that was unimaginable, to the field of psychiatry in like the 1950s. Of course, homosexuality, or what is it, homosexual paraphilia, is a terrible disorder that rendered people unfit for life in society and needed to be treated and cured. And that's still how autism is seen. And I don't think it's how autism will be seen 50 years ago. I think the shift around homosexuality, where nobody thinks it's disorder except a small handful of, Trump supporters. I think that there's, the rapidity of that shift, which happened entirely within my own lifetime, it shows us how fast that sort of thing can change. And I think it will change around autism. And so that was the shift I was talking about with the neurodiversity paradigm, and then that concept of working from a neurodiversity paradigm, doing academic work and such within a neurodiversity paradigm, sort of eventually helped develop into a field of neurodiversity studies that's starting to emerge now. So yeah, that's the neurodiversity paradigm.
That's great. I love that. And I remember the same thing. I mean, when I was in high school in the 1970s, my stepfather at that time was gay, and I was arguing in my high school, much to the consternation of everyone, that it was not, that it wasn't a mental disorder. And like, I was like, that's ridiculous. And people were like, are you gay? And that, I was just like, and my response was like, I wish I was. Like, I kind of wish I was. And people got very confused. But like that, which would, to me now also feels like it was a very autistic thing. It's my flavor of autism, which has to do with, I stand up for, it's like, I will say it, I will say the thing, and regardless of my, pathetic social standing. And so, and when I saw that thing about ABD, which if people don't know what it is, it's a way that most kids still are, the attempt is to make kids seem less autistic, was created by the same people who created the gay conversion therapy. And I remember reading that in Neurotribes and just like, oh my God, this is the same idea. So I agree with you. And I'm like, where's our Stonewall? And so that reminds me, and the other thing I want, because obviously it's your term and the whole book is called NEUROQUEER HERESIES, is your idea of neuroqueer. And I love it. But I'm afraid if I tried to summarize it, I would botch it very badly. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about that.
As a matter of fact, I am currently, there's some scholars in Britain who are putting together an encyclopedia of queer studies, and they asked me to write an entry on neuroqueer for it. And so I'm currently in the middle of writing it, and the document is open on my desktop. So you are in fact getting me to read something aloud that's never been published before. And so here we go. I will read.
Victory is mine.
Yes. Well done. Well played there. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. I coined the term neuroqueer in 2008, inspired by the observation that my experience of the lifelong social pressure to pass for neurotypical, i.e. to conform to dominant cultural standards of neuronormative performance, was both similar to and inseparable from my experience of the lifelong social pressure to perform a cis heteronormative masculine gender role. I initially explored the concept in a series of unpublished class papers written during my tenure as a graduate student in somatic psychology. Drawing upon queer theory, particularly Judith Butler's work on the performative nature of gender, I made two arguments which subsequently became foundational to neuroqueer theory. First, that just as cis heteronormativity and the performance of cis heteronormative binary gender roles can be queered, i.e. deviated from, defied, loosened, and or subverted, neuronormativity can also be queered. And second, that compulsory cis heteronormative gender performance and compulsory neuronormative performance are fundamentally intertwined, such that to queer either one deeply enough inevitably involves some degree of queering the other as well, and such that full liberation from either one must ultimately involve liberation from both. The word neuroqueer was thus intended to point toward both the queering of neuronormativity and the ways in which the queering of neuronormativity entwines with the queering of cis heteronormative gender and sexuality.
Hooray. No,
That
I'm
was
really
a bit dense and academic there, maybe, but you know, academic encyclopedia entry, what can I do?
yeah, no, but I mean, I love it. And it's actually been my experience. That's why I'm so excited, because I never identified with my gender, but nor did I identify with another one. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I never identified as the whatever female is supposed to be, but nor have I thought I was male. And I didn't have any place to put any of that. I'm just like, well, I'm just a alien space person. I don't know. And then I found out I was autistic. And then I read this and I was like, oh, that's what it is, and I don't know whether I'm right or wrong about this, but my theory, because many autistic people I know, I'm beginning to know a lot more as time goes on, have a very tenuous relationship with gender. I mean, some don't, some do, and some don't. I mean, you've said that before too. Like I saw your thing about the essentialism versus not, in that it's hybrid and it's not all a construct. I know, so, but I still like, it was just like, for me, it was this huge liberation. The whole point is it's been a liberation is what I'm trying to say, and I just want to thank you for that, but please interrupt me. I can see you want to.
Moi, interrupt?
Toi, interrupt, yes. Go.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say. I didn't actually.
Oh, I thought you did. Oh, I thought you did.
No.
I'm sorry. Well, there you go.
Oh no, I'm autistic. You know how it is. I'm autistic. If I have something to say, I'll just say it.
Good, great. See, this is what I love. I was like, this is why I was like, I'm gonna have the first person I have this talk with be autistic, so we'll know what we're doing. But I'm so used to working with neurotypicals that I am constantly deferring.
I know. Yes, I know. I'm familiar with that feeling. Yes, we
Right.
have the trauma of always trying to talk to neurotypicals and distort ourselves around them, and then we deal with other autistics, and it's almost like, yeah, we come in with this expectation that they're going to be as awful as neurotypicals are. But in fact, autistic people are awful in entirely different ways.
Exactly. It's true. I'm glad you said that, because it's not like it's so true. We have totally different ways of being awful. I agree. Though there is somebody here who's in another group I'm in who it was really interesting, and I'm not going to point her out because I don't want her to lose her anonymity, but it was just that I was so worried about I'm always worried about being too much. And she actually said, no, you don't have to worry about that here. And I was like, oh,
be more.
Well, I'm beginning to, and it's just, it's a process, it's a process. Well, for me, because I'm like, I spent 57 plus years of my life not having any clue that, and so well, I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. And the feeling was, for me, was, when are the wheels going to fall off this cart? And I had no idea what cart it was, right? It's sort of like, I was like, it's like Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid's like, who are those guys? It's just like, what's going on? And I did trauma work, and I've been in 12-step programs for 900 years, and I've done all the things. And then I did a yoga teacher training, and that was finally the end, because I worked through all this trauma, and still it was like there was a Spam can at the bottom of the ocean. I'm like, what is that? What is that? And I was just joking about it with a friend of mine who is a nurse practitioner. And she just looked at me and she's like, well, maybe you actually are, you have some of the traits. And I was like, what? And then it was just like this moment where it all, fell into place. And I mean, it took a long time after that, but it was that kind of moment where I was like, oh, it's not a joke. Because I'd realized I'd been joking. Like, who does that? I've been joking about being autistic for like years, like weird amount of time. Like, why would you joke about that? And
there's so many things in life, so many important truths where our sense of humor is the first part of us to know.
Totally. And it was always about like restaurants and ordering food and I don't know, just these strange things. And then I walked, before I got my diagnosis, because I've been in so many 12-step programs, my first instinct was go find people that might be like me. And I walked into a meeting in a place called Spectrum Services in New York for women who were or thought they might be on the autism spectrum, and they still have Asperger's in the title in that place. And I walked in, and honest to God, I expected to walk into a bunch of, a room full of Rain Men. That was kind of like what I thought. And instead it was a bunch of people like me, and you and a bunch of other people. It was just like, oh. And then people started talking, and I was like, oh, other people have this, and it was just, and what I mean by have this, not like have autism, but just like have these thoughts and have these feelings that I had thought, because I would speak about them in places where supposedly you could talk about everything and people would look at me weird, I was like, oh, okay, nah, never mind. And so it's been a really interesting, long journey. And yeah, so having said all that, I kind of noticing the time, I just want to make a quick turn, because I want to make sure we have time to talk about the literature aspect. And because you've started Spoon Knife and the anthology, and I know, it's for different kinds of literature, and I'm assuming you also believe and reading about your definition of neuroqueer, it has to do also with literature and art. And I just wondered if you wanted to say a little bit about that, and then I might read a little bit from one of my stories. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a managing editor of a worker-owned indie publishing house called Autonomous Press. And early on, I guess was 2015, I think, we just launched in 2014, and in 2015 we launched this annual anthology title, which wasn't my creation initially at all. It was the brainchild of Athena Lynn Michaels Dillon, who a fellow autistic trans woman who co-founded Autonomous Press, but has since left the press, and who was instrumental in the early development of the concept of neuroqueer. And so Athena, under her pen name Michael Scott Monchi, did the first volume, put together the first volume of the Spoon Knife anthology. And the idea was, initially it was going to be, it's a mix of, it's multi-genre, so all genres welcome. It just has to have neuroqueer vibe in some way, and we've left that deliberately very open and very undefined, that by its nature, if you can sit there policing it and saying this is neuroqueer or this is not neuroqueer, it's not really, this kind of off diverged from the spirit of neuroqueerness already. It's more, does this strike us as having that vibe, as in some way queering normativity and normative expectations in its perspective or something, or in the way the characters in the nature of the author, or whatever that might be. And and it multi-genre, meaning fiction of any genre, and also short memoir and poetry. And so the first volume came out. The first volume was not terribly good, I have to say, because we were still figuring out what the hell we were as a press. There were members of the press who thought it was going to be very autism focused and very disability studies focused and that sort of thing, and other members like me who had zero interest in that sort of thing. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm super bored by the concept of autism. And even though my work is widely cited in the field of disability studies, it's a field in which I have zero interest. So so I really wanted to take things in a literary direction, in the sense of, just can we express this neuroqueer vibe in literature and in, produce high quality stories, some high quality writing. And the anthology series has gradually moved in that direction over time. We've got 6 volumes out, 6 annual volumes have come out, and I'm currently putting together volume 7, which will be out this coming spring, and accepting submissions if there are writers in the audience, or yourself. I think I've already received something from you. In fact, yes, accepting submissions already for volume 8 of Spoon Knife. And if you go to autpress.com, the autonomous press website, easily Googled, you can look in the news tab and find autpress.com. Look in the news tab and find the submission guidelines, for which I really should put in circulation on social media again, but submission guidelines for Spoon Knife 8 are out there. Anyway, it's definitely become, I've co-edited multiple volumes of it at this point, and we have sort of a rotating editorship. Sometimes I'm not involved directly, and sometimes I'm assistant editing, and sometimes I'm lead editor. But it has evolved because I really care about, I'm a writer. I write nonfiction, I write fiction, and as a reader and writer of fiction and an editor, I want quality of story. Like, tell me a good story, whether it's a true story or a made up story or a hybrid of the two, whether it's in prose or poetic form. This is a literary anthology. This is a story anthology. I think the hardest thing about, and these have been great, by the way. I want to say they've been, the volumes have been getting better and better. We've attracted some authors with really major followings in their field, and from a wide variety of fields, from like YA writers and middle grade book writers to fairly well-known horror and weird fiction writers. This latest volume, volume 7, has, I think, the most wholesome story we've ever received by the wonderful Dean Gloucester, who writes YA books. And also, I think, the most raunchy story we've ever printed by Nick Mamatas, who's a well-known sort of weird fiction horror writer. And I love having them both in the same volume. But the hardest thing about putting it together is that people still expect, like, somehow their minds are still stuck in like 15 years ago or something, and they still think that, like, we are, because we've published some things about autism, that like we're interested in material about autism, and we're interested in activist writings, and like people keep like, we got over 400 submissions for volume 7, of which we're printing about 20. And a lot of what people send us, it's like, this would make a nice blog post, Or this would make a nice blog post 20 years ago when the idea of neurodiversity was new, or the idea that like it's hard to live as an autistic person was new, but none of it is good story. And so, yeah, that's been really sort of a challenge of like people being so far behind the times, like, you know, in the sense of not realizing how much literature is out there, and that it's not a novel idea to write about being autistic, or to write a story that says something about the social nature of disability or something like that. None of that is new or novel or interesting anymore, because all of the necessary literature is out there. What's interesting is, tell me a good story that, and I don't care if the author identifies as neurodivergent in any way. I don't care if the author is queer. The story has to queer something. It has to be new and challenge normative expectations, and ideally not in an explicit, on the nose way. You know, if you start out telling me your character is autistic, I already know I'm not going to be interested in the story. So that's an interesting challenge, to get people caught up with where things are now, where the edge of things are, that we don't want to be rehashing this stuff. And I have to say, like, I haven't read your Spoon Knife 8 submission, because I'm not reading any of them until this coming summer when they're all in. But when you sent me your book, you know, there's always like, okay, if somebody sends me a book, like, that's an act of courage, and I'm at least going to look at it. But I'm totally prepared to cringe. I'm totally prepared to be like, oh God, it's going to be another autistic person saying the same stuff that like 90% of autistic books say. And, you know, so there's a little cringe moment. And then I started reading, and I'm like, oh, wow, these are really good, well-written stories. Oh my gosh, I'm just so glad I decided to look at this. I was so thrilled. Oh, wow, okay, this is what I mean by we need something new. Like, the concept of neurodiversity is out there. The concept of autistic consciousness and how it works is out there. We need to build on that and, you know, come up with good practices in the nonfiction world and good stories in the fiction world. And I was so, you know, just thrilled to open your book and see someone actually doing that.
Well, golly, what a great introduction to read one of my stories.
Yeah.
Well, I was thrilled to get your response. Self-servingly, I'm going to read the blurb from Nick, which was, and it literally made me cry. Julia Barclay-Morton writes with grace and unflinching compassion about the sublime and elusive bits of experience that many would find inexpressible. Her words will get into your head and find their way to your heart, and your world will be richer for it, which did make me cry. I was really like, oh my God. So I'm going to read you Red Hot. So this is a fiction that I remembered a situation from when I was a kid. So it's based on my life, but it is not my life precisely. So to be clear, but it is, it's got a lot from there. Denise has the Red Hots. She doles them out one at a time, one for me, then one for her. And then we eat them and make squinchy faces. And then she doles them out again. I'm over her house and we're sitting on her bed, which has no sheets and an itchy blanket cover thing with faded flowers on it that's kind of beaten up and stringy. I always wondered why Denise had big dark circles under her eyes. She always looked tired, and her brown eyes seemed like sad dog eyes, like those paintings you see on sale at Bradley's with the black velvet background. That is when she doesn't have scared bunny eyes, the way the baby rabbits look out back when the cat chases them. And sometimes Denise's eyes are both at the same time. I like Denise. She's always so quiet and barely ever says anything to anyone at school. So I was surprised when she asked me over. We'd never talked. I mean, no one ever talks to me. So it was a real surprise. I am still the new kid. Plus I have the wrong clothes. Again, mommy moves us around a lot. Usually when there's a new man, she's married, and I'm never dressed right for where we are. I have to wear big clunky red rubber boots, not the knee-high zip-up leather boots the other girls get with the smooth soles so they can slide on the ice. And I have a practical winter navy coat that's boring, not like the flowery, colorful maxi coats the other girls have with the fake flare linings. So they all look like Carole King, who has a new album out called Tapestry that they bring to school and show each other, even though there's no record player at school, so it's stupid. But they get their mommies to curl their hair and look like Carole King. I do not look like Carole King, and neither does Denise. But Denise does have long, pretty brown hair that's a little stringy, but that she tries to pull back with little plastic barrettes. Mommy gets mine cut into a page boy because she doesn't like brushing it because I whine too much when she gets to the snarls. Denise just has the snarls and long hair. I think she's pretty. Mommy tells me I would slip and fall in the boots like the other girls have, and I need the rubber soles of the red boots. Maybe I would, but the other girls have so much fun gliding on the ice over puddles and the playground. When I try to slide, I can't, so I just stand there looking stupid. I did try to lick the monkey bars like some of them, but my tongue got stuck and I had to rip it off and it was bleeding, which was gross. The other girls ran away giggling. Denise stayed behind and I asked if I was okay. That's when she invited me over. I was so grateful I said yes. Mommy says I'm special and shy, and that's why I don't fit in. Denise doesn't have any boots, only penny loafers that don't fit right, like someone older gave them to her. She doesn't have any socks on either, so she must be freezing. I'm about to ask her why she doesn't have any socks on, but I see the scared bunny eyes and don't. Her cloth coat looks old too, and its sleeves are raggedy. Carole King has bare feet on the album cover and her jeans look old, but she's inside. When we're sucking on our red hots, I get the feeling these might be dinner. There aren't any visible parents around and just the one light bulb covered by a crooked shade. I don't ask her where her parents are, but I can tell she's waiting for someone. I know because I've spent many days and hours waiting for my daddy to pick me up to take me to his apartment in Hartford with his new wife, Lily, who's really pretty and skinny and has dark hair down to her butt and has a suede bag with fringe. And she looks more like Carole King than anyone and wears sandals even in the winter, but he forgets a lot to pick me up. So I know that feeling, and it's the worst feeling. And you feel like no one will ever want to see you ever again. And like you'd rather just be buried in a hole and die. And Denise looks like that now. So no way am I asking her why. Every time we hear a car drive up her street, she looks up, but then when the headlights pass by, her shoulders slump a little more. I now wonder why mommy didn't even check if Denise's mommy was here when she dropped me off. I guess she just thought Denise wouldn't be alone, but also I'm home alone a lot, so maybe she doesn't think it matters. Mommy is so happy I finally have a friend, so maybe that's why she hasn't asked me any questions about her, but now I think about it, there was no car in Denise's driveway. That should have been a tip-off. Denise wants to say something, I think, or maybe I do, but instead we just look at each other, then look away. Neither of us says anything when the next car goes by, and it's just getting darker and darker. Denise asks if I want to watch television. There's a small black and white TV in the corner with a broken antenna. I nod. Mostly there's just static, but we can see ABC a little bit, and it's showing a dumb movie, but I'm hungry and it's better than nothing. Denise smiles with the scared rabbit look, so I don't ask about food. I'm hoping maybe she'll bring it up. I kind of want to go home, even though that would mean to mommy and Roger smoking pot and laughing at nothing I understand and sometimes at me, but at least I have sheets. My skin is sensitive, so the blanket is itchy even through my bell bottoms. There are no pillows, so I don't need to worry about feathers. I'm allergic. I get itchy bumps on my neck if I sleep on a feather pillow. The stupid movie ends. It was about a woman who's impressed by a man, so she leaves her life to live with him. I hate these shows. Most shows are like this, though. I guess girls aren't meant to have lives, just somehow become part of a man's life. It doesn't seem fair, but mommy does that all the time. That's why we move so much. When the ad comes on for an Elvis Presley record you have to order before midnight tonight, I finally do ask Denise if her parents are around anywhere. I had a friend when we lived in New Hampshire last winter named Brenda, and her mommy got migraines and would have to stay in a room alone in the dark for days. So I'm hoping maybe Denise has one of those. But Denise just shrugs and looks away. It's okay, I say, pretending it's okay, but decide it's time to ask about food because my tummy is making weird sounds. Can we raid the refrigerator? She looks at me with the bunny eyes again, so I don't ask about dinner, and instead we each eat another red hot. I'm thirsty after, and my throat is hot, and I have to pee, but I'm too scared because Denise seems so scared to even ask where the bathroom is. She shows me her doll, though. It's an old chatty Cathy doll, but the string is broken, so she doesn't say anything. And the dress is ratty, and the hair that is still on her plastic head doesn't even have its ribbon. No one has chatty Cathys anymore. Denise says, "This is Flossie." So I say, "Oh." And then she goes, "Flossie has a home in Paris and New York, and someday she'll take me there." And her eyes are dancing happy with a flash of light that is new, and her cheeks even get a little red. I want to say something to go along with this, but the doll has lost an eye too and has no shoes, and it makes me sad. "Do you have a doll?" Denise asks me, smiling for the first time, enough that I see her teeth are a little yellow. I say yes, but not that I also have a lot of stuffed animals and even a couple Barbies. But now I wish I brought them so we could play. And also I can't really sleep without all my stuffed animals in a row next to me, never mind without sheets. But I just feel kind of guilty and spoiled now when all Denise has is a broken chatty Cathy doll, and it makes her so happy. I can't believe she isn't hungry too, but we just get under the itchy blanket on this sticky, scratchy mattress that I see now has brown stains to go to sleep. I can't stop scratching myself, but try to do it quietly. I don't want Denise to feel bad. Denise leaves on the light, and so I notice she has little bright red bumps on her legs. There's a smell of a dog in the house, but no dog. I wonder why I didn't invite Denise over my house, but Roger and Mommy have books in the living room with naked people in them about how to have sex and also about growing marijuana, and I don't want any kids to see this. We get pamphlets at school from the government with stick figure drawings of adults getting arrested for having drugs, so I don't want anyone to know there are drugs in our house, and the naked people are just embarrassing. In the pamphlets, the little stick figure kids watching the adults getting arrested become, quote, wards of the state, and I don't want to be a ward of the state. That's what they call it, which is why I know already I'm not telling anyone, not even Mommy, about Denise not having any parents here tonight, because there's only one thing worse than bad parents or being alone and only having red hots for dinner, and that's being a ward of the state. Everyone knows that. I had a babysitter once who was crazy, and she said she would threaten to tell people about Mommy and Roger having drugs, and so I would become a ward of the state unless I let her adopt me, but I didn't let her adopt me. She was scary, and also she said I was evil, so it was confusing. Why are the people who say they want to help so scary usually? I can't sleep, but Denise does, and then she starts dreaming and saying stuff that doesn't make sense. Her face is in a knot and her eyelids are quivering and one arm is twitching like she wants to lift it but can't. And I can't tell exactly what the words are, but I get scared and wake her up, and then she holds me really tight. I don't know if she's really awake or asleep, so I just let her, and I don't know what to do, but look at the ceiling and the patterns the passing cars' headlights make when they drive by, and I want to cry, but I don't. I just feel a giant hole opening up inside me that feels like it might suck me into it and suffocate or squish me to death or just make me disappear. I'm so glad when I wake up and there's the gray blue light of right before morning. Denise is sleeping at the way other side of the mattress. I must have fallen asleep, but don't know how or when. I'm so hungry and thirsty, and I have to pee so bad. I'm glad to see I didn't pee the bed. I get up and walk down the skinny hall with the sticky, dirty carpet and find the bathroom after trying to open a door that wouldn't, but then the next one did. There's a grown-up's robe hanging off the door. It looks like a man's robe, faded plaid. I don't see a lady's robe anywhere. The toilet handle doesn't work right, so after I flush, it won't stop flushing. Denise comes in, her face all squished red with the shape of the mattress bumps and her hair all over the place, and jiggles it until it stops. I say, let's go over to the Howlands and look for change outside near the dumpsters in the back parking lot, and she agrees. I never took off my clothes, and my mouth tastes like a musty cotton ball, but I want to get out of this creepy house. And if we find enough change, we can buy some candy bars and maybe a soda. I don't know how far away we are from the Howlands at Denise's house, but it's close to where I live, so I'm hoping we can walk. But as we're walking sometimes on a bumpy sidewalk and sometimes on the road with cars whipping by us when there's no sidewalk, I realize I have no idea where we're going. I don't know if Denise does either. In the cracks of the sidewalk, there are tough little plants with pointy leaves growing out of them, even now in February. Some sidewalks are bulging with the roots of trees underneath, and some are cracked open by them. Where I live with Mommy and Roger, and the upstairs of a house owned by the lady downstairs is across from the back parking lot of the Howlands and Friendlies. There's no sidewalk at all, just scrubby grass on a mound with dirt and sometimes some dandelions. When I finally look up from the sidewalk where I was keeping my eyes peeled for change and was about to pick up what I thought was a nickel, but instead was a silvery bottle cap, I see the Stop and Shop sign up ahead, past a grassy triangle outlined by a curb with lots of traffic lights where a bunch of roads all collide. And now I know we're on the opposite side of town from where I live. Mommy says I have a bad sense of direction. But at least in where the Stop and Shop is, there's also a Bradley's and a Pier 1 and a movie theater, and it's like an L, not just a couple stores in a row. So there probably will be lots of change we can find on the sidewalks and in the parking lot. Maybe enough to even get some real food. Usually when I'm looking for change near the dumpsters, it's just for something extra or to ride the electric rocking horse in front of the drugstore. Or sometimes I pretend I'm an orphan or an explorer, but this time I'm actually starving. I want to rush to make the light so we can cross the two big streets to get to the stopping center, but Denise has been walking slowly behind me. I want to yell at her to speed up, but I don't because I don't want to ruin my only friendship. But I think she knows I'm angry because every time I look back at her, she flinches like someone might hit her. Then I realize she thinks that someone is me and I want to die. Somehow, though, I managed to get across the first road when there's a minute without a car racing by and get onto the traffic triangle. I hope Denise is following. I climb up onto the mound of dirt and grass and turn around just in time to see her trip over the curb and fall down. I turn back down and pick her up and over the curb onto the mound before another car whooshes by honking its horn. There's dirt on her face and a small cut on her forehead where a piece of broken glass from a beer bottle must have scratched her when she fell. I find a crumpled up piece of tissue in my coat pocket and try to stop the bleeding. The blood on the tissue makes a deep red blob that scares me a little. Denise is still kneeling and looks up at me so gratefully I want to hit her. Maybe my crazy babysitter was right and I'm evil. I start to cry. Denise puts her dirty hand up to the tissue and holds it on her forehead. She stands up and with her other arm, she holds me tight to her. There, she says, sounding like someone's nice Nana on a TV show. There, you'll be okay. And I just start bawling like a big baby. Some older kids drive by in a car and yell out, "Leslie's." I don't know what that means, but they laugh meanly, and one of the guys with really short hair throws a bottle at us. He looks like he could be the older brother of this kid, Kevin, who is fat and whose face is always red and sweaty and says to me every day, "Hey, you kid, I'm going to punch your guts out." Denise and her old coat smell musty like a house that hasn't been cleaned, but I don't want to move away from her. I look for another tissue, but instead find 2 red hots from last night that I stashed in my pocket. I put one in my mouth to stop me from crying, and it works. And I give the other one to Denise. She must be freezing because her coat is so thin and she still has no socks. So I hold her this time and feel her shoulders moving up and down like she's crying, but there's no sound. Then she's still and moves away from me and opens her mouth and fans herself like the red hot is burning her throat. I see her tongue and lips are bright red from the candy, so I open my mouth and ask her if my tongue is bright red too. She says yes. So we stick our tongues out at each other and laugh. And then we turn away from each other into the cars waiting for the lights to change and stick our tongues out at them and we laugh. I'm crying again now, and so is Denise, but it's different because it's from the laughing. So that was a bit long, but that's the story. And I don't know if that qualifies to you, but I feel like it might queer a lot of things.
Oh yeah. We would totally take that for spoon night. That's my favorite piece in your book. It's beautiful. I'm glad you picked that one to read.
Well, like I wrote that it's so funny, like a week before my first intake for my assessment, and also a week before I got COVID, and then my whole long haul COVID journey began. But that was like February of 20 or early March or whatever it was of 2020. So I was kind of seeing like it was the childhood memories, but I was really feeling and understanding some of the sensory issues and some of the intensity. And now when I read it, I also just see those intensities and also the way of being. And also I have that kind of hyper empathetic version of that flavor. So it's like that kind of thing was all there, I think. So yeah, but I wasn't, obviously stating it because I mean, why would I, given that I didn't know that when I was a kid? So yeah. So Yeah, anyway, and so that I'm glad I read that. I didn't know that was your favorite piece, so that's good to know. I'm glad I picked that. I knew that was the one I wanted to read. So, but I want to just open it up because we're near the end of time. I know that there isn't a lot of time left, but does anyone have a question? If you do, and you want to just use, if you use the reaction thing, you can put your hand, make a little hand gesture, and then I can ask you to unmute, or you can put it in the chat if anyone has a question for Nick or for me. Probably Nick, since I'll be around later.
Yeah, this is a start of a whole series, right? You're going to do a series of these little chats,
Yes,
get together.
yes.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, well, what I did is I realized I had all these amazing, since no one's asking a question yet, I realized I had all these amazing people that had blurbed my book. And in fact, your blurb, it's funny, your blurb was the one that gave me the courage to ask some other people.
Oh, yay.
No, it's serious. You gave me a lot of courage. I mean, it's really interesting how that all kind of fell into place. There was only one other person, or maybe another. And then I asked Joan Lindbergh, whose work I also love. I don't know if you read Letters to My
Yeah, she's
Weird
great.
Sisters. Yeah, so I love her stuff. And yeah, so there's a whole series. There is a question now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a link into the chat for you guys if anyone's interested in the rest of the series, if you haven't seen it. And I want to ask Nick to take on this question. How do you think neuroqueer and consideration of mortality align? Oh, that's interesting. I'll ask you to start and I'll try.
That is really interesting, but I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not sure I understand.
Greg, can you elaborate?
Yeah.
Or do you want to speak? If you don't, could you maybe just elaborate a little? Okay, you do want to speak. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself. You should be able to. There we go. Okay, Greg, take it away.
You can actually see me as well. I can
There
do that.
Go.
Yeah, it was when I was reading Julia's book. Apologies that I'd never got to it before yesterday, Julia, but I wanted to sort of look at it in the context of Nick's book on neuroqueer, and sort of I'm looking at it and saying, well, you're both talking to each other about each other's books, and I want to sort of get this alignment, and it's probably interesting for me in a way, because just prior to this conversation, I was ending up chatting with someone who was feeling suicidal. So I guess I'm looking at the alignment between your ideas. There must be something that we can take out of our considerations of mortality that is different or unique because of our different neurological perspectives.
Interesting. That's a very interesting. I feel like I almost can't do that question justice in the time we have. I feel that should be a whole book or a doctoral dissertation or something like that. It's such a big question, because I think I'm really there's definitely when we start to queer, we start this neuroqueering process, when we start to diverge from normativity and cis heteronormativity and such, there is a shift of attitudes toward life, and it can go in a lot of different directions, because there's an infinite number of ways to be neurodivergent, to be queer, to be, to be neuroqueer, or to do neuroqueering. But there is definitely a shift in attitude toward life. I think I was first turned on to this by the work of Dawn Prince-Hughes, she's a wonderful fellow autistic martial artist, queer autistic martial artist, and writer, memoirist, and an animal rights activist and primatologist. Does a whole lot of work with primates and with other animals. And her attitude towards life and living things is just so striking, her ability to connect with living things. And I see that also in a lot of non-speaking autistic poets like Tito Mukhopadhyay. There's this attitude of an animism, I would say, of seeing the life in everything. And I think I haven't really thought about part of that would be a shift in relation to mortality. And that's something that I haven't seen talked about. And you've really opened up an exciting can of worms here that I wish I just had an answer for you. But what I have is like, wow, that's something we need to look at. That's a beautiful question, partly because I don't have a simple answer for it.
Yeah,
I guess it was, Julia, you kind of did this by bringing yourself and Nick together with your two books, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with Nick. It's a brilliant question, actually. And that's one of those kind of brilliant questions because it brings about so many thoughts. And it's interesting because it was all the grieving I was doing, losing people. This is before COVID, before my own dealing with that led me to all the trauma work, which led me to understanding I was autistic. So it's kind of in my sense, it was sort of the threshing floor, to use a James Baldwin idea. But but also I've been obsessed with mortality since I was little. I mean, so I don't know, now that you mention it, I hadn't thought of it either, and I don't have an answer other than to say it's interesting. And I do feel like I've also, I've always felt like very close to the bone with, and the veil is thin kind of thing, my whole life. And so I don't, it's a great question.
I would say that I think we live in a death ignorant society, and that there's a tendency to simply avoid the topic and to not know how to deal with it, and that's part of normativity. That's a norm in society, is to fill life with a lot of noise in order to avoid the consideration of mortality, as you put it. And so in a sense, there is a queering of normativity that happens just in the act of seriously considering mortality in a way that's not panicked.
Great. No, it's a wonderful question. I'm just aware there are other ones coming in now. So, but Greg, do you feel her? Okay, yes, good. Okay, so we have Emma's. After Greg's question, I'd love to ask Nick about newly diagnosed older autistics who are still trying to figure out what this is and how to unmask when the mask is all one knows. Can she speak about that at all?
I speak about that some in the final part of NEUROQUEER Heresies. When I talk about neuroqueering, there's definitely a strong unmasking element to that. And so, yeah, I do address that there. There's also a book newly arrived on my bookshelf called Taking Off the Mask. I'm leaning over to look at my bookshelf here. It's called Taking Off the Mask by Hannah Louise Belcher. And I have not had time to open this book yet. So I am looking forward to reading it, and maybe I'll be able to recommend it or say more about the topic once I've read it. But yeah, check out that book, because it certainly sounds like what you're looking for. I just haven't had a chance to read it myself yet. But I write about it, like I say, a little bit in NEUROQUEER Heresies, and I do plan to write about it more. I wrote about it in my doctoral dissertation, and nobody wants to read a doctoral dissertation. Don't even try to do that. But I do plan to take that material and turn it into a more accessible book at some point.
Can you just repeat the name of that book once again, Nick, so I can put it in?
Taking Off the Mask. It's a pretty Hannah Louise Belcher, Belcher, and it's a pretty recent release.
Great. And of course, Emma's already found it because she's awesome. So Emma and I found each other's whole other side story, but now we're both recently diagnosed. It's very funny, but we became friends before that. So there's another one from Obscura Manifold. Is there anything you can recommend reading to better understand the concept of mind used in NEUROQUEER Heresies? And I tried to answer that, but I think you mean she means he or she, they mean something else. And so you probably get so go for it.
Right. Yeah, because I talk about the embodied nature of mind in NEUROQUEER Heresies, and that's really central. And as I mentioned, I'm a somatic psychologist. I'm very interested in a non-dualistic concept of mind and body and how the psyche is embodied, and that strongly influenced my conception of neuroqueer and neuroqueer theory. And so readings in the field of somatic psychology, and also a really interesting place to start is the book Descartes' Error by Antonio Damasio. I'm going to put that in the chat.
Yeah, I've heard of that, but I haven't read it yet. I really wanted to because I'm not.
I mean, you kind of have to be a neuropsychology geek to dig it, but I'm assuming that anyone who asks that kind of question is a bit of one. So yeah, Damasio talks about the biological, sort of there's this link between the biological nature of emotions and how that entwines with cognitive decision making. That the idea of a separation between body and intellect, or between intellect and emotion, is all an illusion, and that in fact it all works together. And so that's an interesting starting point. And then that whole field of somatic psychology and I guess books like John Conger's book, The Body in Recovery, or Christine Caldwell's Getting Our Bodies Back. There's a lot of good somatic psych books that kind of introduce that idea of the embodied psyche.
And Obscure, would you like, now I know you're a she, and I'm sorry, do you want to ask anything else? Would you like to be unmuted, or do you feel like your question has been addressed? Because if you'd like me to unmute you, just raise your little reaction hand. No? Oh, yes. Okay, hold on one second. I just want to make sure she gets to ask you what she needs. Okay, there you go. You should be able to unmute yourself now. Check it out. There you go.
Cool. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, yes.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. Because we sort of found the concept very interesting, and it was hard to, because so we're trying to sort of develop an idea of neurodiversity, or the plurality itself, and sort of flesh that out a bit more. And definitely but we're sort of butting up against the concept of mind, and so I think we need to understand that a little bit better. Especially, yeah. But yeah, thanks for that. Because we've seen some philosophy of mind, and I wasn't really sure exactly what angle you were going with the book. But yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, this is a somatic psychology informed philosophy of mind. So it's interesting because it doesn't exactly come from philosophy of mind so much as psychology and really a psychotherapy oriented. I mean, I train psychotherapists in my day job in academia, and so somatic psychotherapy is a major treatment for trauma, because of the way trauma locks into the body and such.
Being in touch with the body and stuff, yeah.
Right, exactly. And so yeah, I think that's a very interesting thing to look at in terms of plurality, because plural systems, different members of the system will have very different embodiments because different neural pathways are
That's
activated.
exactly what I thought.
Yes.
It got to that point. I was like, it seems like we have different embodiments. How does that interact with this definition here? Okay, yeah. Thank you.
That's great stuff. Thank you. And I agree completely. And it's interesting because the reason my website's called The Unadapted Ones is from a quote from William James, who you probably know was a psychologist / philosopher, and I think might have been one of us, to be honest.
I mean, look at the length of some of his work.
And just his obsessions.
And I quote him. I have a particular phrase of his, a particular quote of his that I go back to repeatedly in my doctoral dissertation too, and talking about the nature of autistic consciousness. So yes, big thing.
Well, I will read you the quote that's on my website, and if you can find yours, that'd be great. We can compare William James
Yeah.
quotes. This is my favorite one. I just found it in this an obscure thing he wrote. There are infinitely more things unadapted to each other in this world than there are things adapted. Infinitely more things with irregular relations than with regular relations between them. But we look for the regular kind of thing exclusively and ingeniously discover and preserve it in our memory. It accumulates with other regular kinds until the collection of them fills our encyclopedias. Yet all the while between and around them lies an infinite anonymous chaos of objects that no one ever thought of together, of relations that never yet attracted our attention.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that amazing?
That is, and that is such an autistic experience of seeing associations between things that that a lot of people don't necessarily see. There's this openness of perception that allows perception of different relations between things than what what normative consciousness training teaches us to recognize.
And I found that and have been obsessed with that way before I ever knew I was autistic formally, but like that's, and I think in terms of embodiment, what your definition of autism, I know you're bored with it, but the thing about the synaptic consciousness, I think is really, that really hit me, that our synapses don't prune the way other people's do. And that, so we have, for better and for worse, depending on what minute I'm in, all of them are available. It's like, it's like there's no rationalization, there's no road. It's like basically being in a forest all the time, so it's like all the trees are there, and that's been my experience my whole life. And so, and that then when I read this, even before I knew I was autistic or whatever, it's like, this is my experience. And yeah, so anyway, just thought I'd add that in. And I think Emma also asked, and I know this stuff, so I don't know, but if you, I'm sure you're familiar, well, I'd be surprised if you weren't familiar with it, polyvagal somatic work.
Yeah, not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
No, oh, interesting. I love it. Okay.
It's not supported by scientific evidence. I don't like that Stephen Porges, who founded it, talks about it as a treatment for autism. So
that's
right there is kind of lost me.
Yes.
But also the whole thing is problematic because it doesn't work. The evidence isn't there in terms of the what the actual neural mechanisms are. They don't actually work the way the literature on polyvagal theory claims that they work. Like they're just sort of making up, oh yeah, this connects to this causes this, and there's no evidence supporting it, and in fact evidence really against it. Like Porges' whole theory of how autism is this defect in the polyvagal system, there actually is a clinical study now that demonstrates that he's just wrong, that it doesn't actually work that way. So yeah, it's the latest garbage pseudoscience trend, and it's particularly vexes me because it's happening in my field of somatic psychology, but it's quackery. And still, I'm not, there's people who get results from it, but they make the mistake of thinking they're getting those results from the polyvagal because the polyvagal theory is correct in some way, which it's not. It's just that they're focusing on their bodies. They're doing basic centering and calming and tuning into the body practices that have been universal in the field of somatic psychology for decades, and polyvagal theory is getting credit for it, but you would be better off with almost any other form of somatic work.
Well, it's interesting because I took a training with Ariel Schwartz, who's a yoga teacher and does yoga and trauma stuff, and I actually got a lot out of it. I'll be honest. She uses polyvagal stuff, but when Porges came, We had a thing, he and I, because he started talking about
Yeah.
autism and I was like, wait, whoa.
Yeah.
And that didn't go over well at all, as you can imagine. But there I was yammering away, like usual, because I have honesty Tourette's. But like, I couldn't take it. And it was so funny because he looked at my face. You'll love it because he looked at my face. It's like, oh, but your face, you have all this plastic. You don't basically said you don't look autistic. And I was like, oh man. And I tried to explain, I was like trying to give him the different studies and the different this and that. And he wasn't into it. However, I think because yoga itself, there's some basic kind of Kripalu yoga stuff that I love that Ariel Schwartz has used with it has actually been extremely helpful to me. And the way she has, I got to say, I just want to put, just because the way she's dealt with it and the way she brought it in, I have found just honestly extremely helpful.
Oh, that's great.
But,
yeah.
Because the COVID and long haul COVID really affected my autonomic nervous system, which but the thing I avoided is somebody wanted me to do that whole sight and sound protocol thing. And I was like, oh, no, there's no way that's going to work for me. And I knew it because I just knew that it wasn't going to work, because I knew that it was like a kind of a, it's like a thing that's supposed to, anytime anybody tries to give me a thing that's supposed to work, it just never work. I don't know about you, but like especially any bodies. So I'm very sensitive. The reason I like Ariel stuff is it's trauma informed. So it's all this thing of you have to keep doing the empirical. And I come from Kripalu, which is empirically based lineage. So you're always testing it against your own thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that I find really helpful. So I just want to say, I think you can pull out parts of it. I have been able to pull out parts of it, and it's been really helpful.
Right. What I'm saying is that I know that as a professor of somatic psychology, all the parts of it that are helpful are actually stolen from other forms of somatic psychology and not original polyvagal theory. The only thing they add is this nonsense theory. But I highly recommend stuff in the field of somatic psychology that is not polyvagal. Yeah.
I would love to know what that, do you mind, because I'm obsessed with this stuff. So do you have, would there be any specific books or things you think we should look at? Or I would love to know.
The Body in Recovery by John Conger is a terrific book. Getting Our Bodies Back by Christine Caldwell is really good. If you want to go a little deeper into the academic somatic psychology stuff, Body Process by Kepner, whose first name I can't remember right now, is really good. Bessel van der Kolk's, of course, book on trauma and the body. The Body Keeps the Score is becoming
a great book.
A classic already now. And there's a lot. Let's see. Life on Land by Emily Conrad Daoud is a really very interesting, very neuroqueer chronicle of the work of a very interesting somatic worker. I mean, it's a whole field. So there's a lot, there's a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah.
But depending on how deep and academic you want to get, but I recommend looking, all over the fields.
I want a second Body Keeps the Score, because that actually changed my life in 2017. And it dropped me out of, for the first time, I realized I wasn't a broken toy. And that's a really good place to start. For me, it was. And yeah, that was the beginning of the journey that led me to where I am now, actually. So all props. Oh, great. Yes, thanks. I know people are having to go, but it's been great to have you. And I'm sure I feel like I'm probably keeping you too long as well. But it's been
a
so
pleasure.
great.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, let's see if Charlotte is still here. Charlotte had a question.
Did you? Sorry.
Why I'm bored of autism? Just because I've been immersed in the topic for 20 years, and eventually, it's like I'm not seeing anything new about it, and I'm much more interested in sort of the broader the broader neuroqueering idea rather than the essentialist, identity of autism, or how it, like, I've been so steeped in the topic, and I'm just done with it. I'm ready to move on to other things.
Yeah, I got to say, I do agree with Carlita. There's a bunch of us, and we're all out here now. We're like, hey, we just got here, or we just got to the party, Dan. We're in our 50s, or whatever.
Well, I wrote
I
NEUROQUEER HERESIES, I put that book together so that I could, say, okay, well,
Yeah.
this is what I have to say on the topic. I'm leaving this here for anyone who comes along and wants to learn it. But that's partly so that I don't have to talk about that stuff anymore.
It's a good way. It's a really good way to do that. Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I totally understand. It's because, well, I'm just laughing because I'm kind of working through a memoir, which originally was going to be like a yoga and trauma memoir. And then I found out I was autistic. And so now I'm like, oh shit. So I'm trying to kind of put that in, but I don't want it to be like the things you're talking about, but golly, it's interesting and tough. So
oh, I know. I'm starting a memoir next year as well, and I'm definitely looking at that. Like, I want to, contribute something new. I mean, having read your writing, I'll say, don't worry, you will bring something new to it.
Oh, thank you. I really needed to hear that from you. I actually did, because I was like, oh no, maybe I should just forget the last year and a half of writing and just put it all away. I mean, but that's good to hear. I mean, I hope so, because I do think there's room for literature in this, you know what I mean? So that it's not just self-helpy, yeah. But I think that I'm trying very hard and to combine them together. And also my stage text voice, which you read, because you read Respiration, in that I realized is my unmasked autistic voice that I didn't know what it was. Beautiful. And when I read Authoring Autism, I was like, oh fuck yeah, that's what that was. Like that.
Well, I just see a lot of people in the chat saying they have to go, and so I just sort of say goodbye to everyone who has to go. Thank you, and we should probably wrap up soon. But
we should do. I'm just being super selfish because you're here.
Oh, and no, we could easily go for a couple more hours. Right. But let's just do this again sometime. You have a long and distinguished list of guests to talk to, but you can come back around to me sometime next year.
Awesome, we'll great. I would love that. No, seriously, I would totally love that, and maybe we can read new stuff, like the stuff we're if you wanted to. New stuff.
All right, well, thank you so much, Julia, and thank you to everyone who came to hang out with us.
Thank you so much. It's been just a joy and a pleasure, and we'll be in touch about all the things.
Thanks. All right.
And I will stop the recording now. Okay.
All right. Hey.
Okay.